first question, gentlemen, how should Christians individually and corporately respond to the powerful influence of the media that floods our society with postmodern thinking and action, other than having Al Mohler appear on national television every other week? Do we have any other strategy? Let me start with you, Al, since this is something that you're involved in regularly.
I am, but I would have to say the first thing is to realize that we are stewards of our media engagement, and we don't have to watch all this. We don't have to listen to it. We don't have to go. That's the first part. So there's a sense in which we need to make sure we are careful stewards of our cultural engagement. It is a responsibility, but that doesn't mean we fulfill that responsibility by seeing everything and listening to everything. It's impossible anyway. But we do need to be aware of what's going on in the culture around us, and you don't actually have to immerse yourself in all the artifacts of the culture in order to have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And there's some good resources for that. That's part of the reason why we are here at this conference. It's part of the reason why I do my radio program and lecturing and all the rest. I think the most vulnerable are the young. And this is where I just call upon Christian parents to parent and put a hedge of protection around your children and teach them the way you would teach them to drive. You do not teach them to drive by putting them behind the wheel of a high-powered automobile and saying, I hope this works out well. You take them through rudimentary steps. You make sure first they know how to watch what you're doing when you're driving. You make sure they've got some head knowledge in terms of the law and how the machine works, and then you work with them progressively. But we tend, when it comes to media engagement, which is for their souls a lot more urgent a matter, we tend to throw them in the deep end of the pool, and we don't often do this when they're 14. We're more likely to do it when they're 17 or 18, and they go off to college or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're immersed in this. We need to help them to start learning discernment, to start practicing biblical discernment, to start thinking about how they're going to make their own choices in engaging the culture. And they need to think with a continual Christian worldview filter. What am I really getting here? What is the worldview I'm presented with here? And why does it have such a powerful attraction to people? And how might I give a contrary answer to that, to what I'm calling the subversion? How do you come up with a Christian counter answer to that? Lastly, I would say about engagement with the media, that when we talk about, for instance, our own young people, and as I warned, not throwing them in the deep end of the pool, we need to recognize that they are in a world where the primary symbolic references are media generated. And that may sound very hypothetical, but let me just tell you that the generation of young adults of 14 to 29-year-olds, their cultural world is largely media generated. And one of the things we have to talk about is the difference between reality and perception. And so there's a big challenge there. But the most important thing I would say is don't throw your own into the deep end of the pool until you've taught them at least how to swim and where not to swim.
Thank you for that. I learned how to ski with my son's instructions. He said, "Here, Dad, go." What do you have to say about this?
I learned a very important lesson from the man who's now given me permission to refer to him as the second most handsome R.C. Sproul, who told me long ago that bankers or bank tellers learn to recognize counterfeits by carefully studying the real thing. You don't study all different kinds of counterfeits, you study the real thing, and then you'll notice that there's a difference, that there's a problem. And I think it's very important for us. I think while whatever we consume, we need to consume with that careful grid. I know from my own experience that there's a great temptation for us to excuse taking in all this sludge because we have got a finely meshed grid through which it comes. And what sludgy water coming through a grid is still sludgy water. You might not get big chunks, but it's still sludgy water. And so I would first push towards slowing it down. But secondly, I'd also want to remember this, that, well, two other things. One, because we are so media-driven, I would encourage folks, and especially young folks, to have their consumption of other ideas first come through the written word. There's a reason why Jesus is the Word and not the movie. Honestly, and to get more on that, let me suggest another bibliographical suggestion. Neil Postman's outstanding book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, will help you understand a little bit more about how media operates emotively versus how reading operates more analytically or mentally, and how helpful that is. Having said that, I would also suggest, again from C.S. Lewis, who wrote a wonderful little essay called On the Reading of Old Books, that not only should we and our children be reading more than we are watching, we should also be reading broadly historically. That if I go and read nothing but 19th century books, I'll be a wonderful dinosaur. I'll be a great modernist. I don't want to be a modernist. I need to read from my time, from this time, from this time, and this time. And all of this is going to be able to show me, to borrow a metaphor, the wetness of the water in which I swim. It's going to make me aware of those unspoken assumptions that are part of my culture and help me combat them.
Well, I'm not going to take the position here that every speaker has to speak to each question, but this one is so vital to what we've all heard you men address that I would like to hear all of your input, and that would include you, Ravi, so would you please?
It's a very pertinent question because it's such a powerful and actually an insidious and seductive medium. We are living in a day where people are listening with their eyes and thinking with their feelings. That's the cultural way of absorbing ideas today. So let me break it down into two aspects, and they've really, in many ways, have already been covered. But if you're looking at the entertainment media and then the information media, years ago, William Blake had talked about this life's dim windows of the soul distorts the heavens from pole to pole and goads you to believe a lie when you see with and not through the eye. What the Blakean warning was that we are intended to see through the eye with the conscience, and we run into serious trouble when we end up seeing with the eye devoid of a conscience. So this life's dim windows of the soul distorts the heavens from pole to pole and goads you to believe a lie when you see with and not through the eye. But the entire entertainment medium today is conditioning us to watch with the eye, not through the eye. And the seduction is incredible. I think it was Simone Weil who said, in reality, nothing is so attractive as the good, nothing more monotonous and boring as evil. But in our imagination, it's the other way around. Fictional good is boring and flat. Fictional evil is varied, intriguing, attractive, and full of charm. So when you're watching evil on television, it's attractive, full of charm. Good becomes monotonous and dull to the purveyor of this kind of entertainment. We must learn to discern that. Just think of the movies in the last 3 months. 3 months ago, Dan Brown had Mary Magdalene in France and Scotland. Now they've got her back in a tomb in Jerusalem. You know, if you'd have to believe in the supernatural to think all of this is actually possible. But the seduction of the eye is there. Teach your children to guard their imagination, because the devil does not only come in through the front door of reason, he comes in most often through the back door of the imagination. And if you destroy a young person's imagination, serious problems entail later on in marriage, later on in their commitments, later on in their sexual fidelity to their vows. It's just serious stuff. So the entertainment one, you have to learn that evil has more attraction for the media today than good theoretically can, and R.C. is right. In the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was not video. Word, truth is primarily a quality of proposition. But the second thing is this, and that's the information one. You know, I was talking to a major network gentleman while we were flying back from Delhi to New York. It's nearly a 16-hour non-stop flight. I won't name the network, but it's a very liberal one. So I knew who he was. He didn't know that I knew who he was. And we chatted for a while, and finally when he told me who he was, I said, I don't watch your network. He said, why not? I said, because you distort. I said, you distort, and therefore you deceive. I say, you address a text, it's devoid of a context. And because I was Indian, and he's just coming back from India, was sort of listening to me, I said, do you know how you have represented the Mideast war? Have you ever asked the question on why Europe didn't come alongside? Who all was bought into the pocket of Saddam Hussein? I said, why don't you cover stories like this? Why don't you discuss contexts in these matters so that the world understands that this is not a minor textual problem, it's a worldwide contextual problem. And I told him of my time in the Middle East, and I've just come back from Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. I was with the chief of intelligence in Damascus, listening to his side of it. So I started to tell him about these kinds of things. You know what he said to me when he got off? He was standing on one side of the carousel, I was on the other. He came over to me, gave me his card, and he said, you know what the problem is? He said, you travel, you see, and you understand. We basically give information to those who don't see and don't understand. We give them sound bites. That's the tragedy. And one of the things I respect about Al and R.C. and these other men is they don't just give you a text, they give you a context. It's not just theology, it's theology in history. It's not just why we believe what we do, it's how we came to these convictions. And we watch news and sound bites without understanding the context. It is important to teach your children what the contexts are. Then the texts become sense. That's a lifelong process. It does not happen over one dinner meeting.
Just add to that in terms of the corporate response and the response of the church. I personally believe that the single greatest need in the church today is expository preaching of the Word of God.
Absolutely. 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 Yeah.